This is April 22nd at 9:41 a.m. And we are coming to you from the territories of the Shuswap and Squamish Nation. Work and enjoy living and working in this area. We have an agenda in front of us. We did have another item come in late last night. It's a letter from Scredo, and I would like to have that added on because we will talk about that during Annex K. So with that addition, are there any other additions or deletions to the agenda? Adopt the agenda as amended. Moved and seconded, all in favor? Thank you. So first, let's receive all the reports and communications. Moved and seconded, all in favor? Thank you. And we will now turn it over to our delegation. Paul Fripp and Andrew Davies, long time no see.
Good morning again. Thank you very much for having us. We are here this morning to report the results of our audit on the Sunshine Coast Regional District for the year ended December 31st, 2020. At this time, I will share my screen, so that I can run through a copy of our report. Is that appropriate?
Yes, please.
Right. All right. Just technology acknowledgement. Can you see the report on your screen? Excellent. Okay. We'll start off with the status of our audit, in that we are substantially completed our audit, pending approval of the draft financial statements by the board, as well as a few finalization procedures, which include receipt of a signed letter of representation from management, as well as consideration of all events up until the approval of the financial statement date, which we anticipate will be today's date. Materiality was previously communicated to the board in our planning report. That materiality was set at $1,450,000 for all items other than infrastructure, and then a separate materiality was set for all infrastructure of $2.7 million. These materiality levels remain unchanged from our planning report. Just a sort of an explanation here on materiality. This is the level by which we conduct our audit and ultimately provide our opinion. In this case, for the regional district, we have set 2 materiality levels, which isn't all that common. It's to acknowledge that there are really 2 sort of main components to the audit, which are quite distinctly different in their size. Infrastructure being that line on the financial statements called tangible capital assets, which is a very large number and a significant expense over a long period of time to the regional district, whereas the 1.45 million materiality level looks at all the day-to-day operations and you know the primary things that drive a lot of your tax requisitions every year.
Right, excuse me, I'm getting out.
There's a little bit of feedback on the mic. Okay, wonderful. Right. Consideration of fraud in our audit. Our opinion in accumulating evidence to provide our opinion on the financial statements, we're required to consider the possibility of misstatement, whether arising from error or from fraud. We consider that possibility in our planning process and throughout the conduct of our audit. We have nothing to report to the board arising from our audit, and we're not aware of any actual suspected or alleged frauds within the district. However, if any of the directors are aware of any circumstances, we ask that they bring that to our attention so that we can evaluate if it has any impact on our overall audit opinion. Throughout the course of our audit, we do focus on specific areas that we deem to potentially have a higher potential for misstatement within the financial statements or require special considerations. That's not to say that we don't audit all the areas of the financial statements. We do. It's just these areas in particular we pay close and special attention to, and we report the results of our testing in these areas to the board. The first area of focus is the potential for the impact of COVID-19 on the district. This being a very significant global event has the potential to impact internal controls, funding, expenditures, as well as creates general uncertainty in overall operations in the future. Throughout our audit, we discussed with management specifically around process and control changes. We were also conscious of potential impacts to member municipalities and different electoral areas and how that might impact the regional district. And we also reviewed new sources of funding received in the year and in how that impacted the financial statements as well as financial statement disclosure. Our audit testing in this area was conducted without exception, and we have no specific remarks to raise to the board's attention. Next area is recognition of grant and government transfers. This is a mandatory audit consideration in any audit, and for good reason. It's a complex area of accounting under public sector accounting standards, and there is a potential to inappropriately or inaccurately defer revenues into future periods. So in this area, we are obtaining copies of grant and government transfer funding arrangements and contracts. We're reviewing those contracts to identify stipulations that are contained within those contracts and evaluating whether those stipulations give rise to a liability, which is the threshold for which deferral is determined. Where funding arrangements require that eligible expenditures be incurred in order to recognize the funding, then we're also looking at those eligible expenditures to ensure that they are in fact appropriate in the context of the grant funding and that the amount expended is equivalent to the amount of revenue recognized. Our audit testing in this area was conducted without exception. We have no additional comments to raise to the board. And last but not least, consideration of management override of internal controls. This area of focus, again, another mandatory Canadian audit standard consideration. It acknowledges that management, by virtue of their position, have the ability to circumvent internal controls and have effectively the opportunity to prepare misleading financial reports or manipulate accounting records. I'd like to qualify that that does not mean that we believe that management would conduct these activities. It means that we're required to consider it as part of our audit and conduct testing to discharge that this circumstance didn't arise in the year. To discharge this, we examined unusual and non-recurring journal entries recorded around key reporting dates. We examined adjustments that were recorded to arrive at the financial statement presentation, specifically those that were recorded outside normal control processes or transactions that were outside of the normal core operations of the district. And we reviewed disbursements made to entities or to key personnel, which include senior management and council, and evaluated that against the disclosed financial interests to ensure that those disbursements are being made appropriately. Our audit testing was conducted without exception, and we have no other remarks to raise to the board's attention. Internal control matters, we did not identify any significant deficiencies in internal controls raised to the board's attention. We would like to draw attention, however, to our management letter in which we make several recommendations on best practices. There's no other required communications at this time, which we believe need to be raised to your attention. I'll just briefly go through our appendices. Appendix A is a copy of our management letter in which we make 3 recommendations, 2 of which are around recommended policy improvements. The first one around human resources policies. We identified that a recommendation dating back to 2017 has still not been acted upon, and that policy is outstanding since January 2008. Given the changing landscape and movement towards remote workforce, as well as the desire to and competition over attracting employees, we recommend that this policy area of policy be reviewed and brought up to date to incorporate best practices. The next is around the valuation of contributed tangible capital assets. This is a challenging area for local governments. When development occurs, there's oftentimes a significant, very material amount of infrastructure which is contributed by the developer to the regional district in the form of sidewalks and roads and piping and all that kind of stuff that was put in place by themselves, but then ultimately transferred to the regional district to maintain. Because of the magnitude of the dollar values involved and that they're non-cash, they're more difficult to identify by finance because they're not running through a bank account, but they're also a very large number, important number to get incorporated into the financial statements. We have had a number of adjustments over the years related to this area. And in our review of this policy this year, we identified that there continues to be a sort of a lack of specificity in these policies, creating, I guess, overall challenges for finance to gather the information that they require in order to properly, timely, and accurately record these in the financial statements. This is especially important with the pending implementation of the new Canadian Public Sector Accounting Standard 3280 Asset Retirement Obligation, which I will speak to in a moment. But in order to implement that standard properly, you need to have a really clear and accurate listing of your tangible capital asset register. So last but not least, Public Sector Accounting Standard 3280 Asset Retirement Obligations. This standard doesn't need to be implemented till December 31st, 2023, but even though that's 2.5 years away, this standard is extremely broad in scope and technical in nature, and will require the support of all departments of the regional district, as well as inputs from professionals in order to properly identify all of the potential obligations arising from the regional district's vast network of public infrastructure. So I guess the long and short of it, we recommend that comprehensive plan be put in place and begin working on this as soon as possible, because we anticipate that not unlike a lot of other local governments, that it will take quite a significant effort and amount of time to properly implement this standard. That takes us to the there's Appendix B as well. This is a copy of our letter of representation. That letter is signed by management on conclusion of the audit, and it outlines that management provided us with full unrestricted access to personnel records and information systems in order to accumulate our audit evidence to provide our opinion on the financial statements. That takes me to the end of our audit findings report. Also within your package, you'll find draft copies of the foreshore lease and the regional district's annual financial statements, which attached to those includes a copy of our draft copy of our proposed audit report. Both of those audit reports are unmodified or unqualified audit opinions, consistent with prior years. I will pause now and take any questions.
Thank you. Directors, any questions? Director Hills.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for the report. Yeah, this is again, I love this time of year, right? It's from an oversight. So I got a number, but I'll start with the first one. What happens if the regional district is not ready for ESAS 3280? What happens if we're not ready for it?
There would be a qualification on the audit report, essentially outlining that this standard hasn't been put into place.
And the significance of that, like, what does this mean in more like regular people language?
It highlights that our audit was unable to provide an opinion on the financial statements in certain key areas, and that opinion will be modified with respect to the expenses incurred by the regional district for the year, as well as the annual surplus, as well as the total liabilities, as well as the accumulated surplus for the end of the year. So we effectively remove our audit opinion over all those areas and say that we can't properly conclude on those areas because of this missed standard.
All right, Director McMahon. Sorry, you're on Director McMahon. Let's go to Ms. Perot. She's got her hand up. So.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So if I could just add, the other implications of not having, a clean audit is that would further impact the SCRD's ability through various other channels, such as our ability to probably execute debt through the Municipal Finance Authority and other ministerial type of financial obligations. So as you know, we have a lot of debt-funded infrastructure projects coming online for the 2021 budget and further financial plan. So it is in our best interest, and obviously staff are already diligently working on this new standard to meet the deadlines.
Thank you. Director McMahon?
Yeah, I was just wondering if staff had any further information on the HR policies item that was flagged on page 11.
Who would like to speak to that?
I can just comment.
Senior Manager Parker is here.
Yeah, he is here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Yes, we are aware of the numerous policies that are in need of updating. We have draft information in progress. A big part of this too was also renegotiating the collective agreement. So we have some changes to put in place there. And it's helpful to have this highlighted again as a continued focus for us. So we expect work will continue on it and be prepared as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Directors, any further questions or comments? Director Hiltz, you have your list. Yes.
I have my list once a year. Benchmarking is a concept that has come up through our budgeting process and what the public is asking for. And there's sort of these key indicators: total financial assets, net financial assets, these kinds of things. So some of the public has been saying, how do we compare to other regional districts? And so these are a big question. So this is a standard that all 27 regional districts follow, right? It's all done the same way. It's as standard of a document as we can possibly generate, I think, financially. So there's the numbers and then there's the ratios. Is there a particular ratio that is used as a comparator, a benchmark between local governments? Like, how do we compare ourselves with all this wonderful data that we have? And we have a history of, many years of these audits, and it's throughout British Columbia. What kind of wisdom can you suggest as a way to help the public understand how we compare based on our financial statements?
Okay, I'm going to turn to Ms. Perot. She's got her hand up to answer this one.
Yeah, most certainly. If our auditors have some feedback regarding their expertise with other local governments, by all means. If I can comment, we do provide a lot of statistics within our annual report as far as specifics relating to things like our debt ratio, which align with our debt management policy. I also participate in an exercise with many other regional districts to do a comparative of some of our ratios, our financial related ratios. But what we've all concluded is that it's not apples to apples, because it really depends on what you've executed. For instance, everybody's debt ratio is very different. Everybody's revenue to assets, very different, because it really depends on the services you provide and the various ways you are funding your capital infrastructure, as an example. So most certainly there are some key financial indicators regarding financial health. We've highlighted a few in the staff report today and in our annual report, but we definitely, if there are some that are more important to review, I have highlighted as an example, probably our debt ratio is something that we're really going to want to focus on as we head into the next few years, because we're trending low now at about 4.4%. And if we continue to execute debt in the way we will, we may be challenged a little bit. So, those are just some financial indicators as examples. So I mean, it is a very good question, because I think right now we're in a good position, but we will see.
Yeah, just to echo what Tina just explained there, is that no two local governments are the same, and it does, how the statement of financial position or statement of operations reflects is really dependent, again, on the operations, the services provided, but also there's an element of policy and philosophy that's built into these financial statements. And so there, for instance, we talk about net financial assets as, sort of, as a metric for financial health within an organization, local government, but that's not necessarily always the case, because there could have been a very good reason why local government has net financial debt, and you only need to look at hospital districts to see that they all have net financial debt, and so there's a perfectly good reason for that. But I would these are historic documents and not always good indicators for what the future looks like, which I think is probably the more important question. And the big topic that's always being discussed most recently is around infrastructure deficits. And so heard Tina mention about financing capital and all that. It sounds like that's very much part of the discussion at the regional district right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Director McMahon?
Yeah, I just had a general question from my own curiosity. As I understand it, municipalities can have general operating reserves that they can apply to many different needs. Whereas with a regional district, we have to have an operating reserve for every function. Because of that, do we end up with larger reserves, accumulating larger reserves because we have to have so many little ones?
I don't actually know that those two things would necessarily correlate. So the unrestricted, like how much is built up, is largely policy decision from boards and councils to based on the taxation policies applied, and not many people like to pay extra taxes. So I would say that's probably your primary indicator on what's constraining those unrestricted amounts. But I'll let Tina pipe in.
Yeah, thank you. So it essentially, I don't believe that we would then not be equal to a municipality, or we would generate larger, because what we're trying to do is measure our financial needs or our financial strategies, how we're going to fund certain items to match the service needs. So in the case of a municipality, what they would do is they would take their aggregate asset pool and would then put a value to it, whether it be investing 3%, 6% a year. We're essentially doing that in a macro level to the service level. So we're saying, look, they have X amount and we will fund X amount towards contribution. So in essence, what I'm saying is it's somewhat apples to apples in the exercise that either a regional district or a municipality is doing. What's a little bit different with a regional district is we do have operating reserves, but we use those as rate stabilization to allow us to have some flexibility with emerging operating issues, to mitigate escalations and declines in tax resources through various reasons. So, it like Paul mentioned, they're policy decisions that align how we fund things.
Thank you. Director Hill?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Last one. It's about the future now. I guess last April we were all thinking, what's the future? And it was uncertainty and develop scenarios and get ready for an uncertainty. So a year into it, and the Bank of Canada last night said they're looking at growth that hasn't been seen in decades. All right, this is what they're forecasting, growth that we haven't seen in decades. So I guess yesterday has a lot of capital projects on the books. There's a lot of government funding coming forth. It just feels like the fire hose is going to be doing this by year end. Like lots of stuff is going to be coming along, and local governments are one of the procurers of services. So it's a little bit of a crystal ball, but when we're in a period of rapid growth, what are we looking at, like from a financial point of view? What do you see? Like if we're going to experience something we haven't experienced in decades, what should we be holding on to get ready for this, I guess?
Geez, I wish I had invested in GameStop stock. I had the answer to your question, Director Hiltz. I think we'd be in a different profession or semi-retired already, or properly retired. I think what we highlighted last year is the general uncertainty, and I think this year that came to pass has proved that uncertainty is that there's a lot of volatility out there. Yes, there is a lot of government funding right now. The question is when is that government funding coming to an end? And how is that going to be paid for? So these are some of the unknowns that is going to start having impacts, whether direct or indirect, across your communities, your ratepayers. But then the very real operational impact is, as you build out some of these projects and all this development occurs and all that, there's obviously a lot more things for the regional district and the member municipalities to manage. So I'll pass on to Tina.
Yeah, if I could just add to that, most certainly following a lot of economist-related reports following the federal and provincial budget. And I have the pleasure of being on the MFA's Pool Advisory Committee, so I do have access to a lot of information as it relates to local governments. So I think some of the key things that the regional districts are going to have to keep in mind and how it's going to impact us would be things like low interest rates are going to likely continue, but what that means is our ability to earn interest on the other side through reserves, et cetera, will be impacted. We can likely see the continuation of commodities being quite escalated, which we've already experienced over the last year. And that's based on the disruption with supply chains throughout the world. So of course, the regional district, we are not immune to that, especially in the types of commodities. Energy costs as well, especially with the new carbon taxes, et cetera, and how that's going to impact the regional district will be something that we'll have to be mindful of. So most certainly those are things that I'm trying to tabulate what those various impacts will have at being a local government and what we can see as far as the impacts to the various, especially the capital projects that we have coming online. Chair Seegers, you're muted.
Sorry, yes, thank you. Okay, so no other questions from directors. I'd like to thank the auditors for the presentation, and I think with that we'll move into Annex B in our document package. So on page 75. And Tina, did you want to add some more information?
Yes, I actually just wanted to highlight a few items and understanding that most of you have probably read through the agenda, but just page 78 and 79 of the agenda and some of the key highlights that I think are very important to keep in mind, which the board is very well aware of. And those are things like our provision for landfill closure and post-closure in the unfunded portion. And of course, understanding and bringing to your attention that this year, the landfill expected life decreased by about 6 months to 2025. So I just wanted to highlight that and bring that to your attention. And of course, staff are very mindful of this as far as what next steps are. Also just bringing forward some of the new notes related to COVID-19 has been added to our financial statements, as well as the schedule number 15, which is a requirement out of the COVID restart fundings. So there's various other highlights here. Of course, the pending accounting standard as well. But other than that, I can take any questions if there are any specifics to the financial statements.
Directors, any questions? Seeing, oh, okay. So we've got Director Hiltz and then Director Pratt.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just to address the management letter issues in the audit, is there sufficient resources for the regional district to get those things completed? As we know, is like comprehensive plans, timelines. Like, are we going to get there? Like, and
Go ahead, Tina.
Yeah, I think that obviously management have already started to discuss how we're going to address those items, especially number 1 and number 2. And number 3, the board was gracious enough, and I have many colleagues who are actually quite jealous that you approved a budget proposal specifically to address that particular standard through this year's budget. So I think that builds a lot of confidence to be able to achieve that particular project in the time frame. It's just about business process improvement for number 2. It's really just getting together and formalizing a business process for the contributed assets. Because it's been something that's been highlighted, we just need to get the right people together to execute those particular business processes. And then I think the senior manager of HR has already highlighted, and obviously the work has already started in trying to prioritize which policies are the ones that need attention more urgently.
Thank you. Director Pratt, were you just having your hand up to tell me I was muted?
No, actually, I put myself in the agenda, but then the piece around the landfill. Do we have a communication plan for the public on this? Yeah, I know. I know with all of our solid waste plans and everything, but this, I mean, losing it another 6 months is significant when we've got so much, we have so little time left. Have we started a communication plan around this for the public yet?
Thank you, Chair, for the question. No, we have not. This information just came to our attention as well, and we're currently assessing, of course, what we can do ourselves to use this in our communication about the need for diversion and the benefits of diversion and the rationale for diversion programs that are being implemented.
Thank you. Director McMahon and then Director Ties.
Yeah, I too noted that item about the landfill with some alarm, but I think it's being covered. My favorite part of this report, where I stopped and read it 3 times, was that member municipalities' debt decreased by $1.66 in 2020. That's maybe 83 cents each. So good job paying down that debt, municipalities.
Thank you. Director Ties.
Regarding the landfill, I was wondering, I'm as far as I know, and as far as I've been informed, the amount of reserves that we have are not sufficient to actually pay for the closure. And then we've got the new costs of whatever alternatives we come up to. Are we starting to make some long-term projections as to how much debt load we can put in that direction, and whether we need to increase the reserves even more before the landfill closes in order to not increase that burden too much when it does happen?
I think that would be a Tina question.
Yeah, and I think there's already, and GM Rosenbooth can verify or not, but I believe that we actually have a resolution through the budget process, which is to provide some more financial analysis regarding the landfill. And I think the closure is another factor that would need to be included in that particular financial analysis, because we, of course, have stage H, which is fully depleting our landfill reserve account for 2021. And of course, we'll find out what the true value of that is through the procurement process, which hasn't happened yet. So we will need to discuss this. We are continuing to increase the contribution per year. I think I'll have to verify. I think it's 800,000 we're contributing to that particular fund for 2021. So I can't recall if it's going to escalate by another 125 next year. However, we will have to factor this in as far as our current obligations and what our future obligations are going to be.
So I'm going to ask a follow-up question to Director Ties. Can we actually use debt? If we do not have the funds accumulated, can we use debt to fulfill our closure requirement for funding?
There are certain aspects which potentially can, and I think this is where the analysis will include what are things that we need to do to close the landfill. And part of this liability also contemplates the post-closure costs. So it's whether or not the funding strategy is, once the landfill closes, this particular liability doesn't end. It goes on for up to 30 years is what's reflected in the financial statements. So what it likely means is that there will have to be funds on an ongoing basis to meet the requirements for the closure. So, and of course, those have been valued at, future values, which we update on an annual basis. So those are some of the things we need to talk about. It's not that at the end of the lifespan, we have to contribute or come up with $7 million. It's what the time frame of the financial requirements and obligations are is what needs to be addressed and contemplated in how we fund them.
Thank you. Director Beamish.
Concurrent with the closure of the landfill has to be a plan to establish and reopen and open a new landfill. Is there, and there's got to be a significant cost associated with that activity. Do we have reserves already building up for a new landfill? And what kind of estimated costs around that have we come up with?
Mr. Rosenboom, I think this would be up to you.
Thank you for the question. No, we don't. We're not building up any reserves yet. The current analysis current project that's underway is confirming if there's even an option to develop such a landfill on the coast, and or if it will be waste export. So we hope to bring back to the board further updates on that prior to the summer. And afterwards, I think more clarity is provided. It can be provided on what type of capital investment would be required to or construct a new landfill or a transfer station. While the transfer station will most likely have more significant operational long-term costs as well. And it also comes into play with the update to the solid waste management plan. So I think there are several pieces still in flux. And our CFO just indicated the financial analysis report that we're going to work on and present to the board. And I think this should be part of that as well, the long-term forecast.
Thank you. Director Beamish, further?
Follow-up is that should also be part of our communications. I mean, people can't, that can't be sprung on people when they're thinking, okay, we're going to close the landfill. It's going to cost X. But it's also going to cost X to establish a new landfill or a new means of dealing with it. I think that's got to be part of the communication going forward on the coast here.
Thank you. Mr. Rosenboom? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. The manager of communications and I were already connecting about deliberate communication about the anticipated closure timeline of the landfill, and the budget that was approved earlier this year for a next phase of the project to be initiated this summer for what to do until this landfill closes also include public participation. So this fall we will have the conversation with the community about what next steps are and associated costs. So not only communication, but also actually engagement will occur later this year.
Thank you. Director McMahon.
I was just thinking that the costs of landfill closure are part of the equation that we're looking at for curbside recycling pickup. It's really hard to figure out the cost benefit analysis on that, but it's certainly a consideration, because the cost of not picking up, there is some cost associated with that, as well as the cost of picking up. So I look forward to an interesting discussion.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on our financial statements and the audit process? All right, so I will direct you to page 75. There are some recommendations on that page. I look to the board. Director Pratt, would you like to move those recommendations?
Yes, I'd like to move the recommendations on page 75, please.
There's number of seconders. All right, all those in favor? Thank you. Thank you to the auditors for being here. Thank you for your presentation. Thank you for the work you do for us. We do really appreciate it, and we appreciate you being here and, you know, opening yourself to us to answer all these questions.
It's our pleasure. Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you.
I would like to take this opportunity to also acknowledge Tina and her team, because you know, they do a tremendous job, and we appreciate all their support and hard work. There's a lot of work in the background that goes into an audit, and they do this on top of all the other things that they do on a day-to-day basis. So thank you.
Thank you. I think as a board, we recognize the team that we have working for us. I think sometimes we take them for granted because they just do what needs to be done. Although we recognize the last year in particular has been a lot of work, an awful lot of work. And we've been having them duck and weave and change and, you know, come back to us with, you know, different numbers, different processes, different ways forward. It hasn't been easy. And we know they've put in a lot of time and are really committed to the community. And we thank them for all the work they do. So thank you for that acknowledgement. Thank you. All right, we are at 10:28. I'd like to suggest we take a 10-minute break, if that works for everybody. And we'll come back at, so say 10:30, 10:40. So at 20 to 11. See you then.
Welcome back, everyone. We just had a little break, and we also had Director Seegers, our chair, have some technical difficulties. So I'm taking over in the meantime until she returns. We are at Annex C, the 2021 Budget Project Status Report. Does staff want to do any intros on that one? Or should we just go straight to the directors? Right.
Typically, we just go through page by page.
Okay, sounds good. Let's go through it page by page. Let's start with page 82, items number 1 to 19. Director McMahon.
Right, there is an item there about the EV charging stations. Sorry, I didn't note which item number that is. I believe that's the 4th line item, which is, yeah, electric vehicle maintenance. I was just wondering if there was any further explanation of initiation of this project is dependent on pending decisions on type of EVs and EV charging stations to be purchased.
Thank you for the question. That line item should have been updated because the EV charging stations are being purchased. So this project could stay started.
Okay. Follow up, Director McMahon?
Are EVs charging stations proprietary? Are they like, you know, Apple and the other one?
I think I can answer that one. Tesla has their own proprietary plugs, but all other EVs generally have a standard. There's 2 different types of plugs. One is for a type 2 and one is for a type 3 charger. All right. Anybody else? Page 1 or 82 in our agenda? No? Okay, let's move on to page 83. Items number 20 to 34. Any questions on those? All right, I'm not seeing any. Okay, let's move on to page 84. Items number 35 to 48. Everybody able to keep up? Okay, we'll move on. Page 85, items number 49 to 66. Anybody there? Nope. Okay. Page 86, items 67 to 82. This is easy. Page 87, items number 83 to 93. Nothing there. Page 88, 94 to 107. Nothing there. Okay. I know I had something somewhere. Page 89, 108 to 128. Director Beamish.
The question I'm looking for it here, but perhaps somebody could just answer. In terms of the benefits for volunteer fire members, I think I'm on the right page. What's the status of that, and when do we anticipate they'll be eligible? They will have a benefit package for them.
To staff. Director,
I can answer that. Thank you. Yes, we have a meeting actually set this week with the Manager of Protective Services. Our process that we're going to follow is talking with the manager of procurement and risk with regards to a RFP process, go out to market to actually see which service providers are out there and keep working towards the implementation process. Thank you.
Follow up, does UBCM have a package for volunteer fire departments?
Thank you. They have a package. It's not specific to volunteer fire departments. We have that information from them. Actually, that's one of the initial things we did when we were looking to go down this road. So we have that information. We also have some unsolicited submissions from other service providers, but our intent is just to follow the best practice in terms of procurement.
My concern is that we have approved this, and I know it's early in the budget phase of just having approved the budget as well. But the fire department activity could be ramping up with this weather and other things, and just like to make sure the members out there are protected and have that coverage. So thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you for that. Let's move on to page 90, items 129 to 144. Not seeing any hands up. Oh, there it is, Director Pratt.
I was just going to say Director Seegers is in the waiting lounge. If somebody could let her in, please.
All right, welcome back, Director Seegers.
Thank you.
Want me to
continue on, finish this item. Thank you.
Okay, I'll finish off the budget project status report. We are on page 90, moving on to page 91, item number 145 to 154. I have a question on item number 146, and my question is regarding the zoning bylaw 310 review. Is there still a plan for focus groups, and what kind of process, public participation process, is this going to go through? I'm guessing it's going to go, I think we're at second reading on this, third reading, I'm not sure.
Thank you for the question, Vice Chair. We are not at any readings on this one. Staff are in the drafting process, and at this point we're off the project timeline, and there's a number of factors driving into that, COVID being one and workload being another. I'll say that staff are putting every available effort into completing a draft towards first reading, and we're pushing hard for the third quarter of this year. And while we put all the effort into that, the details of the public participation process that will support next steps haven't been fully refined. They'll depend a little bit on timing, because we know there are certain times of year when different types of public participation work better than others. And of course, public health orders play into this a little bit. But there are both public participation commitments that SCRD has for our projects, as well as legislative requirements for public notification and participation with bylaw amendments. Thanks.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions on page 91? Not seeing any hands up. Page 92, items number 155 to 169. Not seeing any hands up. And then page 93 plus all the completed projects. So we'll do the last 93, 94, and 95 all together. Anybody have anything there? Okay. Now where there was the only recommendations were to be for the report to be received. We have received the report, so that leaves me to Oh, we've got some hands up. Director Hiltz.
Director Lee's in the front.
Oh, Director Lee. Go ahead.
It's okay with me because you've been asking the questions before me, so I've been happy. On the deferred projects, they seem like good things. Do we have a deferred till when on them?
Staff.
Thank you for the question. These projects are deferred, and at least the ones from infrastructure to 2022, and will be reconsidered, brought forward for reconsideration as part of the project process.
Oh, great, thank you. You saved me looking it up because I couldn't remember.
Okay, Director Hiltz then.
Thanks, Vice Chair. It's not about anything specific. It's about the format and how these line items are presented. One of the things that I kind of have noticed is that these pages are sorted by months completed, which is kind of it doesn't take into year. I just need to get back to my page here. Sorry. So what I'm trying to do is draw a sort of a parallel between this ongoing budget process and how we oversee the budget process and the display of how we go I'm going to call it the BPSR, the Budget Project Status Report, BPSR. Go through line by line. But you can see on the first, we go ISC, PCD, we got some CAS in there. So we got kind of a mixture. And usually when we do the budget process, we go through chunks. So we do infrastructure, we do planning. And so we kind of co-locate the rows next to the other ones so they kind of make sense. So I was looking back, the sort of this goes back to 2015 when this document came out. And I'm wondering if it's time to rechange the sort a little bit and to sort it by either function or department, so things line up a little bit more accurately. It would allow us to go through block by block because people are struggling to find pieces. They're looking for fire department, they're looking for water. And if we were to kind of sort them so they all kind of lined up a little bit, it might be more efficient to go through them so that we can talk all about the water chunk, talk about the corporate administration chunk. So I'm proposing that we change the default sort for the printed version because it's how we conduct the meetings. And I do use the Excel spreadsheet and sort it in different ways. And so that I'm interested to hear how other people navigate the 200 lines. And so this idea of a continuous budget process and having them grouped as when we receive the budget project proposals, they're all kind of grouped by function or by department. So I'm starting to wonder about this.
I've got some comments by staff. Manager Crosby.
Hi there. Sorry. Thank you, Chair. This particular one is actually right now sorted by proposed completion date. So to put the projects in order of when they might complete. So yes, like you said, they can be sorted also by the Excel spreadsheet that you have, but currently that's how they are sorted.
I guess we are victims of our own success in putting 200 projects forward that we actually need to think about how to sort them. Follow up, Director Hiltz?
Would it be possible to change the sort so that we can, because we deal with it as a group, as a package. So is it possible, because I was looking at line number 5, it's only actually sorting by month because the completion date was 2018, March 21st. And so you have 2020s and then you have a 2018. So they even don't sort by absolute completion date. So there is a little bit of a sorting issue going on. So that's what would it help us move through this document in a more efficient way to group line items by function? You know, that's what I'm kind of wondering. Could we change the way we do? Like, this is maybe a bit of innovation, you know, 6 years into this format, maybe it's time to kind of change it up a little bit.
Director Lee, what are your thoughts?
I actually do prefer by function. I've got a separate sort that I keep by function that I refer back to because I like to keep the businesses, the services grouped together so I can see the progress we're making by service. It really hits you when you're doing big ones like solid waste. That's when it's most noticeable, but I kind of like by functions if we were going to try something different.
Director McMahon.
Yeah, I don't have a strong opinion about this because I'm going to skim through all of them anyway, but function would work for me. The thing that I always look for is function participants, but that would be difficult to sort on. So I think function might be the optimal answer.
All right. Would that work for staff, Tara?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we can sort it however the board feels.
Okay, I'm assuming we don't need a motion for this. Is that correct, staff?
No resolution is required. We will make the change.
Okay, and Director Hiltz, follow up?
Slightly separate question. It's about the completed projects. Like how long does a completed project stay on the BPSR? Like I haven't gone back. Once they're completed, do they stay there for this term and the next BPSR in October? It won't be there. Is there a rule of thumb about how long a completed project stays there?
To staff. Tara, yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. They do stay on for the duration of the budget project status report until they're added on for the next year and it changes again.
Okay, and Director Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I was wondering if CFO Perot would comment on that sort, if she thinks it's, because she definitely is a professional. I take my lead from her. So if she's got any thoughts on sorting them different, I'd be interested.
Go ahead, Tina.
I do, like everyone else, I sort through the Excel sheet. So I do agree, though, that maybe per functional area would be a little easier to navigate for the public, and it aligns with our other documents. So we're happy to do that. That's okay. This document's had many iterations. Tara's the gatekeeper of the document. So yeah, I think we can go ahead and make these changes with little trouble.
All right, great. Looks like we're all sorted. I will abdicate at this point and turn things back over to Chair Seegers.
Thank you. Are there any recommendations that need to be passed with regards to this item? Perfect. So thank you. Moving on to item 5, 2021 budget debrief and 2022-2026 financial planning process. And this is over to our CFO, Ms. Perot.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I know we just completed budget and now we have to talk about the next one. And the one we just completed. So the purpose of this report is really just to go over the past process and provide an opportunity for discussion on items for process improvement, especially in the context of engagement and communication was one of the biggest highlights that was discussed through this particular budget. So what we have outlined is some of the various recommendations that we have collated through the various budget series. So we had pre-budget And we also had round 1 and 2. And so through those particular timelines, various items were addressed. So we, of course, have the corporate strategic plan, which is going to be reviewed, and we hope to have that completed by June and July of this year, which is one of the key guiding documents for us to begin our next budget cycle. We also have highlighted again, and I will maybe just defer this to our, if there's any questions with our Manager of Communications and Engagement regarding the plan for next year, especially as it relates to the calendar for the 2022-2026 financial plan. We've also made a recommendation to streamline the process for our community partners and stakeholders for next year. There was a few comments about, you know, reducing the workload for them. And typically what happens with that group is that through the pre-budget process, they provide us with their documentation. It's received by the board, but they don't become as delegations until the round 1. So what we're suggesting is, you know, to reduce the workload for that group, one less submission for them is to have them just provide their budget packages through the round 1 budget deliberations, as they can also be delegations. And so that would potentially streamline the process for them. And of course, knowing that if there's anything material, that they would likely be a delegation ahead of time to give us forewarning. We're also providing a little bit of an update on the process and timelines. And this is a little bit back to what we tried a couple of years ago, which was working towards adopting our bylaw by the end of the year, and recognizing there's going to be some incremental steps that are needed for that. We provided some proposed dates for next year's process. And again, there is some engagement and communication that we've integrated or contemplated as part of that. We're, of course, going to continue to do process improvements as it relates to our service plans, because we have all found that those are quite useful for getting a gauge at what current resources, projects, and capacity for staff, and outlining what current services provide, and providing a little operational context in there, because, of course, the budget just speaks to one-time projects. And again, just talking about the rating criteria and mandatory projects. So in the past, there was a change where mandatory projects that related to safety, regulatory compliance, or eminent asset failure were just incorporated into the round 1 budget after pre-budget. And we are proposing again that we move towards that, and we don't actually provide budget proposals. So we're providing a little bit of the rationale as to why we would suggest doing that. Of course, items related to business continuity, as those are service level decisions, would still come to the board for decision. And so just highlighting that there was about 30 last year of those type of projects, all approved. And of course, there's little factors as to why we wouldn't proceed with those. And again, we've just provided a little bit of context of what current projects we have. Of course, we've just presented the budget project status report, but I think in highlighting some of the future discussions about what the budget next year might look like as far as direction from the board, as we still have a pretty lofty work plan ahead of us. So we're all here to take any questions. If there are any, and if there's any additional items, most certainly willing to discuss those as well.
Thank you. Directors. Director Hiltz, then Director McMahon, and Director Tighe.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, thanks, staff, for the budget process. I think this year went better than last year. At least in Area F, it's smoother, judging by phone calls and things like that. But one of the questions that keeps sort of coming up is the difference between sort of the base budget and the budget projects, and how those, like, I think I had a question that I asked staff about the 5-year financial plan, and that the numbers going forward in the financial plan don't really have a tax increase in them. So, but it does sort of essentially say what the base budget is. So I think this is one of the, I'm still trying to understand the base budget and how we oversee the base budget and how we oversee the budget projects, because there's 2 separate streams. And, if we were to shut down all the services, what would that look like? People are kind of wondering. So that's one comment that I have about how to communicate those differences, and that has to do with the scale of these budget proposals. You know, $400 to $8 million. There's a range. So that's one comment that I've got, and I'll step aside. I got a couple others, but thank you.
Thank you. Tina?
Yeah, if I could comment, because I think that's a very good point to make, because the budget that we've adopted over the last couple of years have had some significant financial implications, and they're sort of decided for the current fiscal period. And what we don't look towards is what will the implications be for the subsequent years. And I think what we're trying to do through our various service plans and asset management plan in particular is to try to foresee what those future requirements are. So we, for example, have some of that work happening within the water services, regional north and south, and where we're trying to meet the service level demands for the water projects for the future. So the demand, so the future needs, tied with our asset management plans, which is our existing needs, and then deciding what rate structure we need. So it's a little bit of what we did with the wastewater plants this year, is trying to foresee what the rates are required for the next 2 to 3 years. We did that a little bit with the refuse collection, understanding that we had a service needs. So we're trying to do that where we can, but we're really focusing on more the rate versus the tax requirements. So again, that would come back to a policy decision. Is the board, in some cases, in other local governments, there might be a ceiling of where, you know, we want to keep it within this framework, and then staff can try to meld what requirements could be done within that. But of course, with a regional district, you kind of have to do that in the service by service standards. So that's where we could provide some suggestions. But right now what's happening is lots of projects come forward, and then we find out what the financial implication of that. We try to be proactive through the pre-budget and give the various what-if scenarios to try to give that context of what those, if those decisions were made, but we don't go further past that. That would take a little more work as far as being forward thinking to try to forecast what future tax increases are going to be, or the board can give us direction.
Thank you. Follow up, Director Hiltz, or are you okay with that? Okay, good. Director McMahon, then Director Ties.
Yeah, actually following a bit on what Director Hiltz had to say. The base services that we provide, we never look at them, right? It's only when services are being increased that they come before the board. But the level of service for, say, recreation, my favorite one, we've never, to my knowledge, really had the conversation about what is the level of service or how much spending are we willing to do in this particular area. This is the very first year that the SCRD is spending more money on water than we are on recreation facilities. And, you know, is that our priority when we're facing stiff tax increases? And we haven't had that conversation. And where does that fit into the budget process?
Go ahead.
If I could just comment on, in reviewing the financial sustainability policy and just really looking at, you know, what has been done in the past, we typically do service reviews in various degrees through the year. And the last of those were through the emergency planning and our protective services with our fire department. So that was the last comprehensive service review that was done. I think there is a little bit happening within the recreation with some of the program reviews for this year. So that would be a form of service review. So those are the type of tools that you have in order to do a little bit of a deeper dive. But again, that would have to be contemplated as to how you do that with being mindful of what the lofty projects that we have on our plate, because again, those are quite a significant body of work to do. It's just, you know, providing direction. I think that's part of what could be contemplated is the strategic plan, is those more strategic related service level decisions, but I don't believe a lot of that is sort of articulated in the current strategic plan.
And then there is also a formal service review process, correct? And we haven't necessarily gone down that road, but there is a formal process.
No, and the last one was the solid waste, and usually those are, you know, that's for a specific purpose, and it's typically in the case where you would have a service participant, as an example, who would want to, you know, remove themselves from a service. So you may do a service review. So there's different reasons to do service reviews. There's not sort of a one size fits all.
Right. Okay, Director McMahon, follow up. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I do, for our strategic plan. Let's talk about it, Dan.
Thank you. Staff can add that to the list. Director Ties?
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions. One is the communication plan. I know that Eden came in somewhat halfway through the process this time around, so I'm just wondering if maybe there's a quick little overview as to what's going to happen differently, or what ideas the communications might have towards the next budget.
Mr. Buckley?
Mm-hmm. Thank you for the question. You know, one thing that I'm really keen to reinforce in the coming year is the cyclical nature of our budget process. And you know, the budget communications does not need to just take place, you know, 6 weeks in the run up to the actual budget discussions themselves. So what you're going to be seeing from us is real discussion around each of the individual projects that are ongoing, outline precisely what the budget implications are, and just really letting taxpayers know, you know, what costs are coming with each individual project. Yesterday we launched Let's Talk SCRD, which is our new public engagement platform, which is going to allow us really to engage the public on each of these individual projects through surveys. But the you know, the most exciting aspect of that, I feel, is the opportunity for folks to share their ideas and to ask questions as well about each of those individual projects. So to answer your question, you're going to see you know, ongoing communication around the budget. You're not just going to hear about it in, you know, the 2-3 months in the lead up to discussions. And you know, my intention is, you know, news releases when we're speaking about projects is going to include budget information. But as well as that, it's very important for us to be showing you know, the community and the lifespan of these projects as well, right? So you know, you don't just hear about them when they start and when they finish, right? You're going to actually hear about them as they continue on. So understanding as well that everyone's not online, you know, they're obviously, when hopefully, you know, in the coming months when we can potentially, you know, meet in person that little bit more, and we'll obviously be looking to complement, you know, in-person discussions with the additional tool that we have there in the online engagement platform, whilst also leveraging our social media channels. And what I thought worked quite well this year were the information sessions. And so really putting them together, but maybe putting them together far in advance of the budget itself taking place.
Thank you. Director Ties, did you have a follow-up?
No, thank you for that. But I do have one more question, if I may, and or actually more of a comment. I do like the suggested process outlined on page 99, where we sort of split out all our mandatory stuff and the regulatory requirements. And I think it's key for us to point out what kind of things we don't have much discretion over, to be honest. And then because there's a lot of that in our budget, and it seems to keep on increasing year over year. So I do like that idea on page 99.
Thank you. Director Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I was busy making notes here on what Director Ties was saying. A different issue, though, and it's just a kind of a follow-up on what Director Hiltz was saying, and that is, I keep getting the why questions on the budget, and I'm still getting them, and I'm still trying to answer them. And I realized I can't really answer them. I thought we'd already answered them and found out we haven't, because the things that drive tax increases year over year could be easily what happened late in 2020, but takes full effect in 2021, and it shows up as a base budget increase of expenses. And that's not something we actually look at or try and explain. And the only way you can explain it is by service, because we report it by service, whether we do it by dollar or whether we do it by amount per 100,000. This is all new realization to me, because I thought, well, I already told you we're working on all these projects, see, and they're getting paid for by tax. That isn't the answer. It's a combination of base budget and projects that are going to add to the base budget, and projects that are one of, and you're not going to see next year. And we'll probably add another project for that service to keep your tax rate high. So the next question is, well, why would you do that? So it's, I don't know how you communicate that. And that's just a thought process. I think somehow we have to go by service and understand base budget to start with, and then the effects of projects. But I haven't figured it out yet. I'm still got sheets of paper sitting on my desk trying to answer the why questions. I'd be interested, though, if it was, we could, I think going by rate per 100K by service is a huge step forward, because that part's explainable. But I don't know about the other part.
Okay, so I just want to get clear on your question. What I'm hearing you say, what I think I'm hearing you say is, if we increase our budget in 1 year, but only do the incremental part for that year, for example, something starts 6 months in, we add 6 months to that budget, but next year we have to add the full amount. And that's not necessarily communicated when we're going into the budget. It's just saying, this is the increased base budget.
Yes,
and
that's
so
right.
you're looking at, how do we communicate that part? So
Yes.
These are the projects, or these are the positions, or whatever, that were partially implemented last year and now are fully implemented this year to increase the base budget that we start from.
Yep, and you're never going to see that go away unless we do something different to the service.
Right.
That's the kind of thing. And I've sent it to an engineer, everything I had, because he wanted to know, and he's still coming back at me. So it's pretty complicated, but I don't know if there's some way we can factor that into our communication, or maybe even help, well, me understand.
Mm-hmm. All right, Tina?
Yeah, so I think those are good questions, because of course I think over the last couple of years that it's been quite erratic, especially for 2020 and how it's impacted this year and whatnot. So I empathize that it is a little bit difficult to understand all of that, because the magnitude of it is quite extensive. One of the key things that we put on our budget proposal templates right now is at the bottom is, what is the life cycle cost? And you know, in the case of things that are prorated, the full cost is allocated. So I think it's more finding a listing of that, but it's also understanding, as we continue to layer these things on, what is the overall impact to the service level? Because what we're doing is essentially expanding service. So, I mean, that's the case in many functions, is we're increasing the service level. And I think that is what might be part of the point, is fully understanding what the implications are as you make those one-off decisions, what the cumulative impact to the service level is at the end of it. And the only tool I can suggest, and we used to do this, is the budget book that we put online, and each individual services that provides the budget at the end. We used to kind of use that in tandem, that when you're making these decisions, you'd understand, okay, I'm already at a $2 million tax for this, what the rate per 100,000 is. And if I increase it, and these are base budget, I'm never going to get rid of those types of things, or those things will never go away. We're increasing the service level. So maybe that could be part of the contemplation, is, you know, using those documents as a supplement right beside us to go through and say, okay, now we're on this service, this is page whatever. We used to do that.
Okay, another component of that may be that during pre-budget is where that information comes forward. So that, you know, pre-budget, we're looking at, okay, remember last year when we talked about this increase to base budget, we put in this component, know that going forward, this is where we're starting with round one because of the incremental increase for the full year. That might be something at base budget to bring forward to give us that baseline. Okay. Director McMahon and then Director Hiltz.
Yeah, I thought I would point out that if we wish to have a truly lively public engagement on the budget, we would time it for the day after people get their tax notice in the mail. Instead, we are talking about the budget at a time when people are not really thinking much about their taxes. However, maybe we don't want to be that lively. I just wanted to talk about the community partners and stakeholders portion. I do support staff's recommendations, but I just wanted to point out, because I've been on that other side, being a community stakeholder coming to budget for a number of years, this is the only time that we actually touch base with our stakeholders in a formal way. And so for them, it's a two-part thing that they're doing. Part of it is that they are coming to us about the budget, but the other part is that they're reporting into us about who they are and what they do and the value that they provide for the funding that they get. And, you know, when we're sitting there, we're busy focused on the budget. We're not actually really focused on what it is that they do. We're not focused on the relationship part of the engagement. So I just put it out there as a thought that maybe we should separate those out and have a different kind of a check-in with our community stakeholders at some other time when everybody is not facing, you know, 900 pages of budget. Just a thought.
All right, Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'm gonna follow up on the stakeholder thing, but overall, I support the improvements to the budget process, which are in the report. The stakeholder piece is interesting, and I think part of the opportunity might be in the delegation. Throughout the year, scheduling different groups, stakeholders could to routinely come and be delegations. It might fit in with their annual year because it doesn't necessarily line up with our budget year. So there is already blocks of 10 minutes to do this, and it might be I think it's an underused aspect of our meetings, is that delegation chunk. So that could be one point. But I got a couple of items, but I'll just take the next one and that's CFO and called it, the big book, the financial plan version 4 we're at. Just an awesome document, it's my manual to the SCRD, right? When I don't know something, I go to this document. And the communications manager mentioned this cyclical nature. And so I'm seeing those press releases showing up in the financial plan. So I see this tie of information comes out, there's another block that's going to go into that final document. So I see that building process. So it's really, I'm going to say exciting, budget exciting. Okay. Yeah. To see that building block in that ongoing thing, and then you just wrap it up and poof, it's all done, and we're going, awesome, let's go on to next year. So great job on that restructuring of the document, improved graphics, yeah, all kinds of stuff in there. And just my last piece is, as Director McMahon talked about, is the tax notice. The SCRD has done its part. We put all the data into the hopper, and it goes over to the surveyor of taxes. And so that comes out in end of May. And so this is where I'm wondering, because I don't know if we do our yellow sheets anymore. I don't know if we do these. The insert that we get. And for me, there is a phrase that has caused grief. And it goes, you only pay for the services you receive. And rather than you pay for the services in which you are a participant. And so the public has kind of gone through and going, I don't receive this, I don't want to pay for it. I don't receive this, I don't want to pay for it. Opposed to being your parcel is in the participant area. So I'm wondering, what is the SCRD? What can the SCRD do with the mail outs that are coming out? I know there's limitation which can go in, but what communication is going into that yellow sheet? I don't know if we still do it. I can't even remember last year. So is there an opportunity to update that insert in the tax notice?
So I can start, Chair, and we have for 2021 provided an insert for the rural areas for the surveyor. There was kudos to the communications team. They revamped it quite significantly to be a little more reader friendly and adding a little more infographics. So it's not so finite and detailed, but I'll have to reference it again to take a look and see if there was any wording, and we can contemplate changing that for next year, because obviously the documents already left the building. We had to make sure that was to the surveyor by April 1st. So we will be contemplating that. We also, through the utility bills, I think, are providing a little bit of communication in there regarding the user rates, et cetera. So
okay, I'm going to go to Mr. Buckley and then back to Director Hiltz.
Thank you. Yeah, just to follow on from our CFO's point there, what we're really trying to do is to pull out that information to your point again, Director Hiltz, and really make it that little bit more understandable. In the utility billing, we are including a letter this year which just outlines some of the rationale for increases that some folks in the coast are going to see. But absolutely, moving forward, I would hope that that's what you're going to be seeing more from us is really distilling language down to terms that are that little bit easier understood. So,
thank you, Director Hiltz. Back to you.
Yeah. Just in terms of getting ready for 2022, will we see these? Because we don't really see them as the board. These documents that get put into the mail and the public sees. We see them afterwards. Will we see draft versions of what's going to be included in the inserts for next year? Would that be possible, rather than the horses left the barn, which everything's got a timeline. So, and for me, this goes back to the strategic plan and just lining up all those blocks, and we just push the button and the whole thing squirts out at the end as a budget, right? So is there an opportunity to see those for next year before we get to this part of the year?
Maybe I can jump in and just say, if there is specific information that was provided, understanding we have very limited space. So perhaps that could be contemplated as part of the budget discussions. Maybe have a little wrap up at the end of each round. These are types of communication pieces that we'd like to include. Just also reminding that particular insert only goes to the rural areas. So the member municipalities, they provide their own types of inserts. So I don't know if our manager has any other points he'd like to contemplate.
Mr. Buckley?
Yeah, thank you. Collaboration is absolutely key with all of these documents, and yeah, I'd absolutely be open to that moving forward. I think again, when we look back to what's just occurred over the last couple of months, I think when we collaborated on those presentations for the information sessions, I thought that went, really well, particularly when we distilled down to each of the area specific information. So, absolutely moving forward, it is something that be grateful for some further input from the board on. And the other aspect I want to bring up is I'm also really keen to go to the community and to speak to them about the types of communications we're putting out. So whether it's an insert in utility bill or in the tax notice, and to see what's resonating and to see what they'd actually like to see moving forward as well. So this is not just a we'll come up with it and we'll send it out. It's very much going back to the community to make sure that that they're happy with what they're seeing and what other information they may feel will be of benefit.
I'm going to address the municipal piece. The regional district tax is a significant portion of the tax notice that our residents get as well. So information from the regional district that could be included in our inserts would also be helpful. Director McMahon.
Yeah, I was just wondering if we do, or if it's even feasible to look at the inserts we send out to the people on the small sewer systems, because they have a particular set of challenges and some very high fees that don't affect the rest of the folks in the other services. So if it's possible to, separate them out so that they can get some additional information, or, alternately, I don't know if we put the sewer information and send it out to everybody, but the rest of the people don't need it. They're not involved. So it might not be practical, but I just throw it out there because it is the one time a year that we're mailing out to everybody.
Okay. I don't see other hands up. So I wanted to go back to the mandatory projects piece on page 99. I just had a question about that. So I understand that you're proposing that the information, the cost, be incorporated into round one figures. Totally aligned with that. But I think what we saw in the past was that we actually didn't see what those projects were then that were included. So how do you see this process going forward? Because I think we still wanted to see what has been incorporated. Yes, we approved all 30 because we pretty much have to, but I think it's a piece of transparency to the community as well to say, look, this is what we've included already in round one. So I'm just looking at process. I'm not quite clear on what this is saying here.
Yeah, so if you recall during pre-budget, what we do is we provide very similar a list as the budget project status report. So we highlight those particular projects in there. In that particular list, we say, here are all the mandatory projects going forward, and we provide a little bit of description and the values, etc. So that is where you provide. It doesn't maybe give you as much detail as a budget proposal does, but we could look to incorporate more information if that's what was desired.
I think some of them we've already talked about typically, right? Coming up to budget, we may have talked about some of them that are mandatory. I mean, personally, I'd like to see something on them. Like it might be that the status report is sufficient. And if we have questions about them, staff could flesh that out, but it is still presenting them to us and to the public.
I just had a thought, and we could come back as sort of a staff to see what that would look like. But our internal process is such that there is a lot of the detail work that's provided through the vetting process internally. Mm-hmm. So what we could potentially do at pre-budget is provide that little more detail, almost like a mini budget proposal, as to here are the mandatory items coming forward for decision for inclusion in round one. And through the pre-budget process, we can do a little more vetting type stuff or awareness, because there might be some continual cost implications. There might be some resourcing implications. And I think I'm hearing that you'd like to understand what those more detailed implications are, to also make sure we communicate those.
Yes. I mean, an example that we're dealing with, not a mandatory, is the partial closure of one of the segments at the landfill. It's a huge cost. It has staff implications, it has tax implications, all of that. It's all there. If we were to just include it in the budget and say, well, it's mandatory, we're not going to talk about it, I think that we need to have some level of disclosure to the community. That's what I'm getting at, so that they know the mandatory work that we're doing behind the scenes, and that it does have a cost. It does have an implication, an impact. So I'll leave that with you. Anything further on any of the items in here? Oh, one of the ones that we didn't really talk about that Tina brought forward was about the timing. So on page 98, we're looking at timing for pre-budget round 1 and round 2. So this would be earlier than what we've done before. So any feedback from directors? Director McMahon.
I'm fine with that. If it makes sense, and if it's going to align our budget better with various things, then sure, let's do it.
Thank you. Director Ties?
Yeah, I think that I would like to have some staff input on this. I know it's desirable to, or we've expressed a desire to have the budget process come in earlier, but it being COVID and there's a huge list of items that we're trying to work through. Is this another thing that we don't necessarily need to be doing now, or is this something that's manageable workload wise?
Yeah.
Well, I can. We've discussed it as a senior management team, and I believe that the first iteration was changed of what was proposed, just because I think that would have probably overwhelmed staff if we started, say, in October, because I think that's just too tight a timeline. I think how we see it as well is we can always pivot if it's really not working, or if there's, things that evolve, which this may require us to change it. I think we typically do pre-budget in November, and I realize that, turning those around, there is a fine timeline, but I think what we can do is try. I think the goal is to try to approve it so we can have a little more time to actually get into the projects and start procuring those and working on them in that particular year. But still understand we still have lots on the go.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I notice is we're doing round 1 and the budget proposals coming forward basically, community 13th, 14th, 15th of December. And then there's a break. So staff go away for 2 weeks. Typically, we go away for 2 weeks. And then we're coming back on the 24th of January. Actually, January 24th through 26th. Is that sufficient time for staff to turn around the information from round 1? And not necessarily just the budget items, because I understand if we say, yes, we're going to incorporate this, no, we're not going to incorporate this, but where we have additional information requests, is there sufficient time for staff to gather that information to come to us for round 2? Just given the holiday. Tina?
I think I'll acknowledge that may be one of the constraints, that may be part of the challenges, but I think that's what we're going to have to assess. And I think that what the hope is that we're going to have less budget proposals coming forward next year. But of course, we don't really have a sense of what that might be yet. And again, maybe just, putting the message where there's more and more information about what these projects are, that you're not seeing them for the first time at pre-budget. So we try to give the board as much and the community as much heads up on what might be coming.
All right. Any other further questions or comments? Okay, so I'm going to direct the board back to page 96. There are some recommendations on page 96. Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair. I'm happy to move the recommendations as presented on page 96.
And that's been seconded. All those in favor? Thank you. Moving on, item number 6. Union of BC Municipalities Resolutions, page 101. And yeah, over to Ms. Reid.
Thank you, Chair. This report is a call for topics. Should the committee wish to recommend resolutions for submission to the upcoming virtual Union of BC Municipalities Convention. I also want to note that they just actually confirmed the dates to be September 14th to 17th.
Thank you. Directors, any ideas now? Let's go talk to you about timing. When do you need the information? It's not necessarily today, is that correct?
So if you look on page 101, timeline for next steps, the recommendations for final endorsement must be made no later than the June 24th board meeting in order to meet UBCM's deadline. So if there are topics brought forward today, staff would bring forward draft resolutions to the May 27th Corporate and Administrative Services Committee for the board's consideration.
Thank you. Director McMahon.
Yes, I think as other board members are aware, I have a bunch of concerns around the authorities and regulations around regional districts that I think urgently need to be addressed by the province. And we missed the drop dead date for AVICC, but we will have attended AVICC before the UBCM deadline shows up. So that's actually good, because does AVICC have any avenue for late resolutions?
Thank you, Chair. My recollection is that due to the virtual format that they have strongly discouraged them. I would have to check back and see if they've implemented a new process for that this year. But typically the rule is late resolutions are considered if the issue arises after the deadline.
That's a little awkward because this is a long-standing issue, but we have not had any adequate attention from the province. As an example, we've raised the parking issue, parking in rural areas a number of times, and the province just goes back through UBCM and then they churn out a response that says they're thinking about it. And they've been thinking about it since 2014. So, you know, we've got a lot of pent-up demand here, and I look forward to a conversation at AVICC if we can manage that.
Thank you, Director Toth.
Thank you, Chair. I've got the AVICC website open. I just wanted to add in that right off their website, in a one-day virtual meeting, the same process will not be possible. Late resolutions and off-the-floor resolutions cannot be accommodated in the 2021 resolutions and should be submitted directly to UBCM.
Thank you. Director Ties.
I'm just wondering if we can repost all the resolutions we didn't get a resolution on. I think there's a number of them.
Okay, so I don't see any topics coming forward now. If topics come up now, between now and when you need time to prepare them to bring them back. How could we handle those?
I'm going to recommend that the topics be submitted through the CAO, and then staff will bring the report forward to CAS to a public meeting for discussion.
Thank you. Director McMahon.
Yeah, another drum that we've beaten a number of times is around Recycle BC and how they handle the non-residential waste stream, because it's giving us grief still ongoing, and it's maddening, but what can we do? Maybe we should just beat that drum again.
All right, there is a recommendation that's been put forward on page 101, and just that we identify topics for resolutions to be prepared for the 2021 UBCM convention, and we could probably add something that we identify topics for resolutions to be prepared and submit them to the CAO. Director McMahon?
I'd make that motion.
All right, is there a seconder for the recommendation? Seconded. All those in favor? Thank you. Moving on, item number 7, status of operating and capital reserves as at March 31st, 2021. And directors, any questions? Seeing no questions, we'll move on to item number 8, Annex G, Gas Tax Community Works Fund Update. And is someone giving any kind of intro to this report? Ms. Fuller.
No, Chair. I just wanted to highlight that we did add a few items to this particular report. Given that we received correspondence from UBCM shortly before the report was drafted, to just highlight a few of the points from the federal government, that there is a potential outside of the federal budget to do a top up or a doubling of contribution for the gas tax for this year. And so we provided a little bit of scenarios there if that does happen. And also just a recognition that the particular gas tax program is going to have a little bit of a rename shape. And I think that aligns with how the federal government is moving along with this type of pot of money, as well as comment on page 111 at the top, which is an explicit comment that they made regarding unspent funds. So I think there is a little bit of directive. And so I think that's a little bit why for the 2021 budget, we did provide revised budget proposals to be funded through gas tax for the rural areas in recognition that this was likely coming. So now it's in writing. So I think as we head into the 2022 budget, this will be much more of a topic and mindful piece of work. And I know that the MODI agreement related to active transportation is a work in progress too. So that's all I wanted to bring to your attention.
Thank you, Director McMahon.
Yeah, I know that there are plenty of projects in the hopper this year. So we're really planning for next year at this point. I have a number of active transportation projects in my area that have been identified as, high value, low cost. And so how are we going to plan for spending this money? Like, what is the process going forward? It's complex. Like, it's easy if I put a bike lane in area E to say, we'll spend the money on area E, but then we came up with the issue that if we tried to spend something on the recreation center, then we've got the municipal partners in there. So it becomes much more difficult. So how do we plan this? The projects that are already in the hopper there are so old at this point that the budgets would be insufficient, and the ability of the staff to do them is kind of questionable. So how are we going to have this discussion?
I think that one of the first steps would be through the strategic planning process to see whether or not this is a key priority of the board, which I'm, is that where you want staff to focus our attention for next year? Again, I just defer to CAO McKinley as far as the status of the agreement with Modi. And so that would have to be endorsed by the board for us to be able to do that, and maybe a subsequent workshop or meeting as far as how all of those pieces would fit. And essentially, it would lead to some sort of budget process. So it seems like a lot of pre-work would need to be done to be able to do that. I wouldn't suggest we would do that as part of pre-budgeting. You'd want to have a pretty good idea of what you're thinking before you go ahead of that, because those things will also have to be resourced.
CAO McKinley, any update on the agreement?
So the agreement has been reviewed by Modi, and I did forward it over to, now I'm going to forget his last name, but Brandt at UBCM. They're going to look into it in a little more depth. However, the initial reply I got from Brandt indicated that, a cursory review of the MOU, he thought that it would probably be, as worded, eligible to use gas tax funding under the provisions of the MOU, but he was going to do a bit of further review and just clarify it. So I'm just waiting for further clarification, but we're probably in a position that we can bring it forward to the board now for consideration and signing.
Thank you. Director Ties and then Director McMahon.
Yeah, I had a conversation with Michael Brown about, possibly using it for active transportation, and I guess it's called shoulder widening officially in Moti speak, because they can't actually put in separate bike paths along Lower Road. And it sounds like it'll be a lot more complicated than just the SCRD saying, hey, let's pave this shoulder. I'm having worries that even when the agreement has been signed and everything's good to go, that things will drag out considerably because Moti needs to be involved in all the decisions that need to be made around active transportation. I hope it doesn't take us past 2024 and we lose the funds. That's sort of my worry at this point, but it does sound fairly involved, and I don't think Moti knows who's going to be doing the actual planning of it, whether it's us or them, and to what extent they can be involved, and to what extent we can pay them for it, and to what extent they're willing to put staff's time aside to actually have, even if we pay for it, that they will actually do it.
Thank you. Director McMahon.
I am also very concerned that we could run past the deadline and lose our funding. RDN already has their MOU signed, and Modi is working on a project right now on Gabriola Island. So why is our agreement just sitting in limbo, circling? And it did come to the board. I swear to God, it came to the board and we voted on it like a year and a half ago. So this is very frustrating. We need to find out for sure, can we spend this money, and not just on road shoulders, also connector trails on road right of way. I've got a couple of key connector trails that we want to put in, and they've been sitting out there waiting for a decision for years at this point. So we need some clarification on all this. And then I'm not clear what else we can spend the funds on in the rural areas, because a lot of the sort of infrastructure projects that are eligible are not located in the rural areas of the SCRD. So I think there is an awful lot of unanswered questions here, and I don't want to find us coming down to the wire I understand staff are really busy right now, but at least if we can pin these things down, then we can say, okay, we want to spend it on this in 2022 or 2023, or maybe even 2024. But we'll have a plan. Right now, we have a lot of money and no plan.
Thank you. Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'm just wondering about the scale of this. I'm broadening it out from just the SCRD to, the unspent funds, a considerable amount of funds. So the SCRD is not untypical of other local governments in BC. And is this even like a national project? Is this a national issue that there's this, seems like a pot of money has been put there and it hasn't been spent. So there's a bunch of local governments that are in the same kind of category as us, the BC and other provinces as well. And it must be a discussion going on somewhere else other than just here at this table.
I looked at Tina for that one.
Well, in my discussions with UBCM, these are specific to UBCM, so I can't speculate to what's happening in other provinces, but
Director Hiltz?
Does UBCM actually publish these unspent funds anywhere? Is that like a report? Do they do a report of the gas tax and shows how much is unspent? Is that a public document or?
So UBCM administers the federal gas tax agreement between the feds and the province to the local governments. What we are required to do is provide a report annually to UBCM on the various projects, and then they publish that. I would have to go and look on their website to see how much has been, if they report on how much has been allocated and or unspent. So I don't know if that data is available.
Thank you. Directors, it sounds like we need to pull together the directors to look at what money can be spent on. And then, or perhaps staff could resend us the information. I know it's come to us a number of times, but I think we need to see that again. What can the funds be spent on? And then bring the directors together once they've had some time to look at that to put forward various projects that they are contemplating with a little bit of staff feedback so that we can look at how the funds can actually be allocated. Director McMahon.
Yeah, I've read, what funds can be used on a number of times, but I'm not clear on how that applies here on the coast. Like airports would be an example, and whether that would apply or not, or water infrastructure other than Area A, which is in a simple situation relative to their funding.
So you're looking at not necessarily what we spend it on, but how we can spend it on given our funding structure on the Sunshine Coast. Okay, Tina?
Yeah, and one of the things too that I think we've kind of run up against is, as we do with grant opportunities, because I don't see this as much different. It's having shovel-ready projects, because you can have many great particular ideas, but how does that align with the service needs, right? Because you're talking net new in many cases, and what we're trying to do is, maintain existing services. So I think that's, there's an opportunity for further discussion about how this might fit. I know that we have started it between ourselves and part of the drafting the gas tax policy and as part of the budget this year. But I think for the next few years, there is most certainly some more work and opportunities with it.
So it sounds like staff are also looking at potential projects to bring forward. So from Director Mann's comments prior is, how do directors feed projects into that so that when staff are contemplating potential projects to bring forward, that they also are looking at, do these projects fit inside of the timeline, inside of the bigger picture or not? And if not, why not? right? Because if the community members are asking for these, they're going to want to find out why they aren't going forward. I'm going to go to Director Toth, Director Lee, and then back to Director McMahon.
Thank you, Chair. Just looking at the 2018 gas tax project list that's on the UBCM website right now, there's the full range of stuff. Yes, I recognize the regional district isn't responsible for road paving and things like and sidewalks necessarily, but there's there's backup generators, there's lighting retrofits, there's building efficiency upgrades to fire halls and community halls. There's a ton, there is some aquatic center stuff in there, which recognizing the C. Shelton Gibson's contributions could be difficult. But I'm pretty certain if the directors each went out to their community and said, what do we need to spend, what could we spend some gas tax money on? Directors could come back with a pretty comprehensive list of project ideas out of the community. There are even entities that are doing electric vehicle charging stations and charging infrastructure, paying for it with gas tax funds. So the projects are certainly, there are lots of ideas out there. We don't have to try and, invent the wheel here.
Director Lee?
I was going to say something very similar to what Director Toth said, except that trying to do some of that this year, because I came to the conclusion earlier that I don't have enough time left in my life to get Modi organized to put paths where we need them. So I needed to start spending the money on what the community wants. But what I discovered is that we need quite a bit of assistance from staff during that discussion period. And we need to plan quite far ahead, because you end up using staff resources that perhaps could be used for something better. So we need to get the discussion started. If we're going to spend gas tax money next year, we need to get started before pre-budget so that we've got some, just exactly what staff does now by service, but how do we get involved in that by service, and what's the resource we use to actually get those projects on stream and in the budget process, so the priorities can be set so we can spend the money. That's the whole issue with the darn thing. You go to the community and say, hey, I got some money, what do you want? Man, they'll tell you, and it won't be hard to spend that money. But the question is, can we? So.
Can we, and does it fit inside of the direction that the regional district is going? Right? There might be staff, priorities from staff. Director McMahon?
Yeah, I don't think it's that simple in rural areas. For instance, there is a fire hall in my area, but it is funded by areas E, F, and Gibson's. So there's nothing, and the community halls are not funded individually by each area. They are in a pool together. So this is, it is going to be a bit hairy. The other thing is, if something comes up, for instance, we're replacing the water main along Reed Road, and the section in Area F, if the Area F director says, since we're doing this project anyway, we'd like to do a better shoulder, can I put gas tax money into it? How do we do that? How do we flag these opportunities?
Thank you. And the CAO put his hand up, so I'm going to go to the CAO.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to add that in the conversation I had with Brant, Felker is actually his last name, I finally remembered. He had said that they were thinking of putting together some sessions for local governments on sort of their perspective on the use of gas tax funds, the philosophy of hoarding those funds for special projects versus spending them, what it means when you've got funds left over as the agreement comes to an end, and so that's one thing. I'm hoping that they're going to be able to do some presentations, and I said that our board would certainly welcome a presentation if they were to put one together. And I guess the other factors to consider when we look at this is all the existing projects that are already on the books and stuff that we know are coming forward within the next couple of years. And some of those are simple asset management, water main replacement. There's all these other things that are eligible for the use of gas tax funds that end up kind of competing at times with special projects or active transportation infrastructure, but they're still eligible for the use of those funds and should probably be considered as part of any sort of gas tax fund utilization strategy, as it were.
Okay, Director Lee.
Yes, Director McMahon prompted my memory on how we can deal with multi-jurisdiction gas tax money. I believe there is some projects that if we could throw gas tax money in, like it's very similar to what we do when we cooperate and grant and aid, only on a whole lot bigger scale. It's entirely possible. For instance, there's a very large area on Saginaw Lake that's reserved for future park, SCRD park. I'd be happy to throw my gas tax money into building that. And that's a shared function, but everybody would use it. Probably even Area A wouldn't use it as much as all the other areas if it was built. But those kind of things, if we get together and we talk about what's possible and what we would like, I believe you can get agreement pretty quick. People, if we could spend gas tax money on building that hall in Half Moon Bay, I'd be throwing my money in. So that's the other half of what I was trying to say, is that perhaps we can find out if there's relaxation of the rules for special projects. If UBCM can do it, or do we have to change rules, or maybe we aren't spending money because the rules are a little bit too tight. Maybe we need to get those changed. And I think if we could have a workshop with staff support to just look at this subject and consider all the angles prior to budget, perhaps we can get spending our money. Sure like to do it.
Thank you. CAO, you have your hand up.
Sorry, no, it's more that I forgot to take it down. My apologies.
Thank you. Okay, so what I'm hearing is that directors would like to hear back from staff on gas tax funds, a gas tax funds utilization strategy for projects with multiple contributors, potentially including municipalities, to the functions or service. So how do we, like Directors Lee example, how do we all contribute potentially or not to a water main or to the fire hall where there's multiple, right? What kind of strategy could we use to do that? Director McMahon.
I also heard the suggestion of a workshop. It sounds
Yes.
like a really good idea. I think we need one.
Yes, but covering this off as well, right? This is what we're looking at. How do we do this? So that would mean staff would have to do a little bit of work behind the scenes. Tina, questions, comments?
No.
All right, thank you. Director Toth.
Thank you, Chair. Just a real quick question is that if we do look at planning a workshop, is there anybody from UBCM or from the Community Works Fund, like the federal side of things, that we can invite to come to this as a authority on the subject without having to necessarily pile a whole ton of questions on our staff that they have to then go and try and find answers to?
That's a good point. CAO?
There are potentially people we could invite. No guarantee that they will accept said invitation.
Thank you. All right, directors. This is voting electoral area directors, although I'm sure the municipal directors would like to be there, given we want to see how we can work together on this piece. But we wouldn't actually be spending the regional district gas tax funds. So directors, what would you like to see come forward to direct staff? Director Hiltz.
I thought I heard something about that. This is going to be rolled into the strategic plan review. That's going to be the place to kind of dig into this a bit more. Is that the potential? That's what I've been hearing is the strategic plan. It happens in June, pre-budget. Kind of, is that the alignment of when this is going to happen? Is it going to be part of that process now?
Thank you. I'm going to ask staff because I don't know what the agenda is for that. This might be a bigger conversation that would take a lot of time at a strategic plan review. Director or CAO.
Yeah, right now we'd sort of envisioned the strategic plan review to take a similar to what we did last year, which was an evening and a day. And I think if we think back on that, we filled that evening and that day with the strategic plan review. I think this would be something that would be a separate dedicated piece, or it would definitely require additional time. But if that is, it's something we can put together.
Director McMahon?
Yeah, I would like to suggest that we have a workshop on gas tax spending strategies. And I'm not going to set a timeline on that right now. I think staff should recommend when is the sensible time to fit it into all of our other processes.
Given that we'd like to potentially have some projects to be able to start showing up in budgets at some point to be able to spend the funds. Yes. Okay, so there's a recommendation that we have a workshop on gas tax funds utilization strategies. Is there a seconder for the recommendation? Seconded. All right, any other comments or questions? Director McMahon, you're okay. All right, electoral areas only. All those in favor? Thank you. Moving on, item number 9. This is contracts between 50,000 and 100,000. Any questions or comments? Thank you, Ms. Kropp, for being here. Looks like we have no questions for you. Moving on, item number 10, Director Constituency and Travel Expenses. Again, questions or comments from directors? Director Hiltz.
I'm the communications aspect of things. We have got some resources in our communications department, and this constituency expense, which it doesn't look like it typically runs into deficit. It usually ends up in a surplus. So the question I kind of have is, have electoral area directors ever worked together to pool their constituency funds to do communications, like a center, something in the newspaper, rather than going it alone? Has this ever been done in the past? Like, I'm just, if there's money here and we're not using it, is there a way to use it in a different way that hasn't been done in the past?
Well, I have to say that as a municipal director, if we have SCRD information to distribute, we also can have access to constituency funding for that. And no, that has never been, in my time here, it's never been proposed, and it's not saying it can't be done. Come up with some ideas. We can see it when it happen.
Yeah. So I guess so. There really is. It's up to the authority to spend this money is a combination of CAO and the directors. That's how it's determined who has the authority to spend it this way.
I believe it's policy that's set up that determines how we spend the funds.
Yeah, CAO has to sign it off first of all, right? Before an expense is paid. So there's some process in there that no one asks me, is this a constituency expense, or incorrectly fill in my form. But I don't get a report saying that this is what I spent on constituency fund. It's a tiny little amount. So is this where, like at a rural directors meeting, we could bring this up as a topic? Is there a way to pool some funds to do something with it? Is that one of the places we could talk about this?
I think you can talk about it anywhere. Tina?
Well, yeah, the comment of policy is correct. I think that, if a proposal was brought forward, we can always take a look and say, yeah, that meets policy, or that's, if it's to promote the office, I think that's sufficient. I'm not sure what you're contemplating. So I don't know if it's okay. I don't know if the communications or the CAO have any comments at all.
All right, I don't know if we have, Mr. Buckley's not with us anymore. Director McMahon.
Yeah, I can just give some examples of how constituency expenses are usually spent in my experience. There's direct mail outs. I just mailed out a newsletter, which runs to, by the time it's printed and mailed, it's probably $1,000 for my area. There's my Zoom account. I got a paid Zoom account so that I can, facilitate community meetings. In the past, there used to be community meetings and events. Ha ha ha. That's not going to happen for a while. And my website, I run that as a constituency expense. I can't visualize too much more. Much as I'd love to spend it on beer, I don't think that's happening either.
All right, Director Ties.
Yeah, similar to Director McMahon, I pay for my website. I pay for the access to the boot tails and their mailing list. That's where I send some of my updates to the community, and the Zoom account as well.
Thank you. I think this is going to be a further conversation, probably offline, to see what kinds of things we can come up with. All right. Seeing no further hands up, I'm going to move on to Annex J. Number 11, Local Government Development Approvals Grant Program Application. Mr. Hall.
Thank you, Chair. So the province and Ubcm recently announced a new grant program focused on improving local government development approval processes. And this program, like a lot of recent announcements, has a pretty tight timeline to apply, but it is very well aligned with our needs right now. SCRD has recently made a number of process improvements, which we've spoken with the board about, and we remain under very high pressure by a lot of file types or metrics. Our planning and building workload has approximately doubled in the last couple of years. And we know there are new expectations from our customers, as I know you know as well, because we have some improvements, including adding online or virtual services in our strategic plan. And so this grant could support a lot of that work, and staff recommend that an application be made prior to the deadline of May 7th. Thank you.
Thank you. Director McMahon.
I would like to enthusiastically move the recommendations on page 116.
Is there a seconder? Seconded? All right. I just want to point out, as part of the grant application, that second last line is the wording that we have to pass, right? Where it says the SCRD indicate to UBCM a willingness to provide overall grant management. That is the piece that will be forwarded on with the grant. Director Hiltz.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just a quick question on the grant. Is it an all or nothing? So it's like you get 253K or it's nothing? And the other question is how do the municipalities, are we competing with municipalities on this grant funding? And just are they doing it? Is Seashelt in town doing it as well?
Go ahead, Mr. Hall.
Thank you. On the first one, the program guidelines aren't clear on whether it's an all or nothing thing. Staff will put our best foot forward in the hopes of achieving the best possible result, I'll say. And in terms of coordination with the municipalities, or competition, I guess, at the staff level, there has been communication, and we are very much looking to put forward proposals that are complementary. And staff have discussed the possibility that the products that we're looking for, which are different from each other, could be shared and could improve everybody's performance here. And we'll make that clear to the funder in the hopes of a coherent and cooperative regional approach that is attractive to the funder and benefits everybody. Thank you.
And it was, we did approve it last night at our council meeting that our staff put forward the grant application as well. CAO?
Just further to GM Hall's comments, one of the things that we would also note that we'll try to make abundantly clear to the funder is that when you look at our application as potential SCRD application and the District of Seashelt application, the two total less than what either of us could have applied for in terms of the program maximum. And there may also be an opportunity to have letters of support. For example, there would be nothing stopping the District of Seashelt from providing a letter of support in support of the SCRD application and vice versa, noting that while they are two different projects, they are complementary projects, and they are not competing with one another. They are complementary to one another, and in a lot of ways, the province has an opportunity to have two ribbon cuttings or / photo opportunities for successful projects instead of just one.
We could do a joint letter that goes with each application.
The possibilities are endless.
Totally. All right. Any other questions or comments on what's on the floor? Sorry, GM Hall, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to ask Chair if that's a motion.
Oh, okay. We could add that in as an amendment to this recommendation that's on the floor, and that a joint letter of support be put forward by the District of Seashelt and the Sunshine Coast Regional District to accompany both applications. Is there a seconder for the amendment? Seconded. All right. So we have a recommendation on the floor, and it's also that this go forward to the board this afternoon. All those in favor? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hall. Last item on our agenda, number 12. This is
point of order.
Sorry,
we
yes?
didn't actually, we only voted on the amendment.
Oh, did we? Sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, we need to vote on the amended motion, please.
Yes, thank you. All right. All those in favor of the amended motion? Thank you. Thank you, Director Pratt. Annex K, online accommodation platform funding for affordable housing initiatives. And over to Ms. Perot.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this particular report is good news story in such where Sunshine Coast Tourism, through the Municipal Regional District Tax, the MRDT, applied through the online accommodation platform toward affordable housing initiatives. In late February, Sunshine Coast Tourism advised us that we were successful and we would be receiving a little over $86,000 related to 2019 and 2020 OAP funds. And so the purpose of this report is to seek approval to submit an application through Sunshine Coast Tourism to Destination BC to engage for an individual or agency to perform a regional housing coordinator for a fixed period of time and budget. And we would report back as part of the May 20th Planning and Community Development on the status of that proposal and move ahead with the next steps. So myself, GM Hall, and staff are here to answer any questions. Understanding there's an additional piece of information that came today.
Yes, we received the letter as part of our communication. So we already have that, and I think I have it in front of me. So further to the report that is here, for those who attended the emergency housing meeting on Monday night, the 19th, a steering committee has been set up to deal with housing on the Sunshine Coast. 5 directors were appointed, and they would like to have basically, I mean, they've already put together, as the letter indicates, they've already put together a job description for this position, and would also like to work with the regional district on moving this forward. So staff have actually proposed an amendment to the recommendation that is on page 119, and I'll read that out and then I'll go to directors for questions and comments. What staff are suggesting is that before and further that we add in, and that staff explore options for collaboration with the Housing Steering Committee as part of next steps. An additional amendment to this is that we add at the bottom that this recommendation be forwarded to the board this afternoon. Director Pratt.
To clarify, so the staff recommendation is different than the one that's been proposed by the letter from Scredo, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and okay, so I'd be supportive of the staff recommendation, as I had concerns with the proposed recommendation that was coming forward, because this is a brand new steering committee that actually was just elected on Monday. So I'm happy to hear that we'll look at what's going on there. I know we've got a breadth of knowledge and everything that's happening there. There's been a lot of work there. However, I have some concerns, as it is a brand new committee that hasn't been tested and is just finding their feet right now. So taking understanding the breadth of knowledge and experience that's there. However, the committee is new.
Thank you. Director McMahon.
Yeah, we do have somebody from the emergency housing group in the gallery. I'm wondering if we should ask for some comments and any concerns.
Thank you. Matt McLean, would you give him permission to speak?
How you doing?
Good. What would you like to tell the board?
Yeah, so I think it's just important that we keep this movement rooted in the community. So I recognize Director Pratt's comments about that the committee is very new, but it is all well-known people in the community. We have representatives from community services, from Scredo, from the Affordable Housing Society, including people with lived experience. So it's a really diverse committee. So I think I'd just like to ensure that we do include them in the process. And I think the proposal that staff brought forward is that we consult with the steering committee is a good one, and that you just try and figure out next steps, because we want to move quickly, and I think we can leave it to staff to figure out how exactly to do that.
Thank you. Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair. Having just had the auditor talking about money going in, money going out, and accounting for this, is anything have to be done specific to, like, how does this money go in, and the accounting? So this would go through the audit process, and I guess I'm wondering about the accountability and the oversight of this money in the steering committee. That's what I'm trying to. What role would the board have in overseeing that?
And we look to staff for that.
So right now, in part of the recommendation, which was outlined in the report, this is going to be flowing through a regional district service, because the Sunshine Coast Regional District is the ultimate recipient. Excuse me. So anything we do would have to be followed our policies and procedures.
So in other words, the money comes into the regional district, goes into the regional planning service. And as part of the receipt of the funds, if we make an application to use them for a particular project, then the regional district is responsible for reporting back on how they were actually used. And then that becomes part of the audit process. They look for that. Okay, any other questions or comments? Director McMahon.
I'd appreciate having them. Oh, wait, we don't have a motion on the floor yet.
We don't have a motion on the floor.
All right, but I'd appreciate it if it was read out in full, because I've become confused about what we're talking about at this point.
Perfect. Okay, so I'll read the recommendation as proposed and then see if someone would like to move this. And this is voting all directors. So besides the receipt piece, it's and that the 2019-2020 municipal regional district tax / online accommodation platform funds in the amount of $86,001 be allocated to the regional planning service, $500, and that a proposal be submitted through Sunshine Coast Tourism to Destination BC to engage with an individual or agency to perform as a regional housing coordinator for a fixed period of time and budget, and that staff explore options for collaboration with the Housing Steering Committee as part of next steps. And further, that staff report back to the May 20th, 2021 Planning and Development Committee on status of proposal and next steps for implementation. And further, that this recommendation be forwarded to the board this afternoon. All right, would someone like to make the recommendation? Moved? Is there a seconder? Seconded? All those in favor? Thank you. Seeing no further business, I would look for a motion to adjourn. Moved, seconded, all in favor? Thank you. And do we have any questions? Look to IT to see if there are any questions that got emailed in.
A question for Matt while he's here, because he's been taking the lead on a lot of this. Will there be a formal submission to the elected governments on who's actually on the steering committee? Like official communication out? And how soon will that be?
Yeah, so I can arrange for that. But just since I'm here now, it's Colin Stansfield, Mickey McCartney from CapU, Catherine Leach from Community Services, Mike Aslop from the Affordable Housing Society, and Amanda Burton.
I'm sorry, the last name was Matt?
Amanda Burton.
Yeah.
Amanda Burton.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none, let's go have some lunch and we'll see you back at 2 p.m.